members of the group. I first met Carlos Davila in Spain within the meetings of the group, Ibero-American Group of Studies of Entrepreneurs and Business Historians. It was for me surprising to know Carlos Davila, Xavi Duran, Luis Fernando Molina, and all the great people connected to them, Beatriz Rodriguez Atizabal, later Andrea Yuc, and all the great people like Adolfo Meisel, who came from the Caribbean business history area. They were, for me, first of all, extremely humble business historians. When I met them in international conferences, especially Carlos, he was always taking notes, always. He was really eager, absorbing like a sponge all the knowledge that he was learning in international conferences. He was extremely generous too, as all the other members that I have met in the group. Generous sharing, generous supporting, generous offering invitations to teach, invitations to publish in Cátedra Corona series. Carlos Davila was and is, in the time when I met him in international conferences, extremely supportive of women colleagues. I think that he has been the only person in an international conference in which he recognized and naming one by one, first name and last names, all the different women colleagues, business historians who had been contributed something relevant in business history of Iberian business history issues and topics. He was naming one by one, and he didn't need to do it. I think this is something very particular of Carlos, extremely kind, extremely educated person. I think that's a Colombian feature, but particularly in Carlos, he's a very educated person. And when I invited with Andrea Yuc a group of people, scholars, to do a book about the history of family businesses in Latin America and Spain, sponsored by Banco Bilbao Vizcaya, Argentaria, I remember that he always considered his chapter to be the less interesting, the less influential to contribute to debates. And for me, it was exactly the opposite. His chapter was the most relevant because he was unique by indicating the singularities of the relationship between politics and family businesses in the history of Colombia. His chapter pointed out to the surprising fact for many that presidents of Colombia, there were many, at least 4 to 6 presidents in Colombia who belonged to well-known family businesses of the country. And for him, that was something that was exceptional, therefore something that could not be indicated in the book, because it was something different. I said, that's exactly what we want. We need something different. You're providing that difference. Carlos has always been an excellent, good friend, extremely intelligent, someone who has been doing excellent books and has done something that I have not been able to do in Spain, in Barcelona, which is to be so humble, but at the same time so sharing and supportive that everybody feels comfortable with him working. He has never been the type of leader, far away, cold, distant, the hero, controlling power. Just the opposite. He has been great team builder, and I'm sure that he is doing something exceptional in Colombia. He has been doing that, and he has managed to gather incredible good people around him that are continuing the legacy. I have to talk today about something many of my colleagues have already been touching upon in their presentations, but nevertheless, I will try to do something new, if possible. Let me see. Can you see the screen? Yeah? Okay. You see a big dinosaur? When Andrea told me to talk about thinking ahead, as a historian, you have to look backward in order to move forward. I think that business history for many of my students is a dinosaur. For many of my students, professors like me are like dinosaurs. In many ways, trying to think why the discipline and maybe myself, we can be perceived as a dinosaur. I believe that this was maybe because there are very strong forces that are changing the way we are perceived by students and younger generations. One, increasingly, is about technology. I have called the asteroid artificial intelligence as a symbol of how technology is making business history or business historian a bit obsolete. And the other force from the outside, from the environment, is deglobalization, asteroid DG. Deglobalization encapsulating so many external forces, changing the audience for whom we are doing our research, for whom we are writing. I completely agree with comments that we have here before about the relevance to take into account the communities to which we are addressing our research and how our communities are having different interests and different concerns. What is relevant? That's a big debate, of course, as we have seen in the workshop today. What is relevant in business and in business history today? I asked this exactly to Alfred Chandler before he died, and he said that exactly it was about resilience. Because the far away you go in time, the more difficult it is to find accounts, to find quantitative evidences. So he said that if he had to choose a word about business success, it would be survival, resilience. How long a firm, how long a business, an organization is able to survive. Uh, I did try to remember that and asking, in the case of business history, what relevant factors are determining longevity? And the example of the dinosaurs may be helpful. I think that in many ways, business historians or business history may be resilient if we adapt or if we don't adapt. Adaptation to interests, adaptation to the technology we have around, adapting to a new world. I am not a management scholar providing lessons for the future. So that's why I used a book written by Mauro Guillén, a Spanish expert who's now the dean of the Cambridge Judge Business School, who was former professor in Wharton. He published not very far away, I think 2020, this book, How Today's Biggest Trends Will Collide and Reshape the Future of Everything. And this is a great book about challenges and concerns we have today, the people who have to read our books or the students who have to choose whether to do a research or a dissertation on business history, or maybe change and do a doctoral dissertation in management. And I think some of the challenges that business historians maybe are now thinking that we have to address in some ways, climate change. I think that Geoffrey Jones is an example of the capacity to adapt and address also the wars of empires, wars. The word wars is there. Many students are worried why we should care so much about how people, how firms, how countries can become rich when some countries, firms, and people are destroyed by wars. So maybe we should be more resilient and more sensitive about introducing again crisis and wars in business history, much more. deglobalization, something that, again, Geoffrey Jones started to do some theory about, that we should do much more consciously. We can no longer be studying the golden years of capitalism without considering that that capitalism has been destroyed. Our students don't want, my students in Barcelona do not want to do dissertations about the golden years. They want to understand the destruction, the decline, the crisis, what has happened. They want to know what has been wrong in business in the last years, not exactly what went well, which is what I was trained to teach or do research about in the 90s. Artificial intelligence and technology, again, we can no longer ignore that many dissertations may be using articles for journals. I know people who are using artificial intelligence to adapt reviews from reviewers in order to change their articles sent to journals. I know that it's increasingly difficult to keep using software to detect artificial intelligence in articles sent to journals. So we should maybe start thinking about what we really want to publish in our journals, because people can cheat, and not just young people, senior people are using ChatGPT in order to try to publish and get promotion in their university, which is making us think, again, what's going on also in business history. Africa and the next industrial revolution, population aging in America and Western Europe, middle classes and rich younger generations, emerging markets. They are increasingly arriving to many private universities and public universities, and they want to hear about their countries, their society, their business organizations, and we know very little about them. Someone has mentioned urban history and how there are a lot of people that are interested in what's going on in cities, but also what's going on in the periphery of big cities. I have John Fonseca, a PhD student, who's now interested in studying the growth of the first innovative industrial districts, innovative districts in Costa Rica. So he's comparing what has been done. I had to study about innovation districts because he wants to study that to understand the emergence of districts in Central America, the empowerment of marginal or excluded groups, including women, but not just women. So these are some of the challenges. There's also something additional. As I said, I just put in this slide in order to wake up the audience because it's a bit late after 3 hours. So I put 2 lines in this slide, which I took from Supertramp song, hey teacher, leave us kids alone. All in all, you're just another brick in the wall. We have, especially in public universities, maybe not in private ones, but we have sort of a revolution in the classroom, especially after COVID. Increasingly, students want to do studies outside the classroom. They don't like to be in the classroom. They want to be in their home or no one knows where. There's a clear problem also of all generations of scholars in the faculties and a lack of money, because among other things, the humanities and the social sciences are more and more becoming marginal in public and private funding. We have no money to hire teachers. Older teachers are remaining until retirement. Older teachers have no idea about how technology works. So if we don't use new technologies or we don't use artificial intelligence in order to manage the supervision of dissertations, we are lost. This is like some of the big problems that we are facing today in public universities in Spain. But thinking ahead, there are some innovations that are showing us some directions for work. Some of them have already been mentioned. One is international intercultural comparisons, more and more, especially for students who have a globalized mind and they have like very powerful technologies. They need to compare. They need to be able to have tools, but also concepts and theories and challenging questions to compare. New topics. Again, some of the people, some of the scholars today have already pointed towards sustainability, green industries, responsible business. But there's also, I increasingly feel many people like in the business departments, which is health, the construction or the destruction of health systems, welfare, or even entertainment. And more also, public and private partnerships, which became in fashion in most of the world after the 1990s, after the crisis of the early 1980s, when the public companies collapsed or reduced their resources, and they needed to start agreements with private companies, be it foreigners or national, in order to cope with increasing social needs and the collapse of the welfare system. We need also, and we start to have and develop with much obstacles, new theories and methodologies. Christina Lubinsky, Marcello Bukeli, Matthias Kipping, Takafumi, also among many other people, have been leading the narrative turn, Steffi Decker, for sure, the narrative turn in history, trying to combine organizational theories, entrepreneurship, and a humanities turn in how we do business history, which is tremendously interesting and tremendously interdisciplinary. Game theory, I think in my faculty, there are more and more students that are being engaged in using game theory in business history, actors, networks, objectives, strategies that can be understood or analyzed with game theories. And of course, the gender framework, which is something that crosses all the other theories. This is my last slide. I don't know how much time now is left, but the green words are the key of my last message. I think that in agreement with what has been said before, business history, if we want to survive and not just be a dinosaur that will die with this current generation, we must adapt and align with the concerns of the time and try to adapt and hear a lot, listen a lot about the new concerns and in that way adapt what we study, how we study, why and for whom. Baby boomers are declining. There's an obvious impact on businesses that were created to give consumption resources and needs to the baby boomers that will disappear, that maybe we'll have to adapt, and that can be studied, among other things, because we have oral history. And we need to use oral history much more. We need to rethink business history also because there are new actors that have to merge in our research and in our teaching plans. Information and communication technologies. I think that we have to reduce possibly much more traditional sources or traditional methods and to increase the use of videos and oral history in the business history we will be doing now in the coming generation, much more oral history. There are many people who have been crucial in the golden years of growth, in the baby boomers years, that will die, and we need to interview them and use their histories, their ideas. Emerging economies like from Latin America or businesses that are created with immigrants that have arrived to Western Europe or the US, they are increasingly changing what kind of businesses are being done in the West And there's also a big change in what's being done in the rest. There's a demographical revolutionary change that must be put at the very center of international business and business history. We have to do a complete Copernican revolution and leave much more the concerns and the theories so far we have used, developed with empirical evidence from the 80s and the 90s, and start trying to draw new theories drawn with problems and questions and empirical evidences that bring new questions from the 19th onwards. Finally, I think that's a particular personal concern. I think that we should try to do more business history with hybrid types of businesses. What I mean, in many table of contents of books or special issues, we see the traditional organizational categories, state-owned enterprises, private corporations, joint ventures, whatever. But what happens if there are hybrid forms of business organization? And also what happens when there are joint ventures between peripheral companies from peripheral emerging economies of the world. More and more, I find evidences that Japanese were the model, not just for Southeast Asian companies, but also for Italians or for Spaniards or for some Latin American companies who found more easier to learn simplified, standardized lessons from the Japanese and from the North Americans or the British. There are more and more evidences that we must unveil and study about the partnerships and informal partnerships, informal processes of knowledge transfer between different business cultures. By the way, and I would close with that, I think that one interesting uh, uh, final comment to close my short presentation about business history ahead is the importance that business history groups like the one in Colombia, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary, the importance of crossing borders. Many Latin American scholars have been traveling since the late 1980s, especially 1990s, to Spain. And many Spaniards have been traveling to Latin America. The language has been a key factor that has helped knowledge transfer, cross-fertilization. And I think that Spaniards have learned a lot, and we are learning a lot from Carlos Dávila, from Xavier Duran, from Luis Fernando Molina, from Andrea Yuc, from all the big members of the group. And I hope that maybe also they had some learning and some knowledge transfer received from Europe and from Spain with the many projects and the many congresses and the many conferences that we have been having in the last decades. Congratulations, Carlos. Felicitaciones al grupo. You are also an envy. I envy you deeply in my heart. You are an example of what I could have done that I never will be able to do. I will be really happy. And I think that your personalities say a lot about what needs to be done in order to make a successful group. The human factor, I think that matters a lot. And in your case, you have great personalities. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Paloma. Thank you very much for your generous words. Christina Lubinsky from CBS, Copenhagen Business School. The floor is yours.
Super. Thank you so much. Thank you, Javier, and congratulations. It's a great privilege and also really fun to be part of the long choir of congratulators and celebrate all of you for what you have done. I think there's been incredibly amazing success story to tell. I mean, the Copenhagen Business School Center just has 25 years, so we look at you with a lot of envy, and we hope that we can get there one day. kind of experiencing and celebrating something this wonderful. So this is number one and the most important message, maybe. Let's celebrate and congratulate this amazing center. And of course, that goes to you, Carlos Davila, for this amazing group that you have put together. That also goes to Javier Duran, who's been a dear friend and wonderful colleague for so many years, and Andrea Luc, who shakes these conferences and workshops out of her arm just like this, and they're always amazing and they're always fantastically inspiring. So thank you for that, and please more of that. We would love to see a lot more of that. I don't know, they told me my homework was basically be relevant, which I take as a little bit of a difficult task to accomplish, right? And now you're almost getting set up for failure. So I think, being relevant and moving business history forward can happen in so many different ways. And we've already heard so many of the big themes and topics that should definitely be part of the larger conversation. And I think there's a number of people in the room that are already actively working on all of these amazing topics. And so I'm looking forward to seeing much more of these results in writing and at conferences and to learn more about these topics. For me personally, I've kind of made a bit of a choice for the next few years to focus specifically on rethinking entrepreneurship in society, because that is a research grant that we have started last year here at CBS. And we have the great honor to have a big group of PhDs and postdocs working on a very particular historical question that is somewhat different maybe from where the typical social scientist and my colleagues in the business school are working and what they're kind of trying to accomplish. So I agree with Jeff and others who have said the social sciences are hungry for more historical insights. I think that's exactly right. And I think they are asking us to be a bit more forthcoming and to reach out to them. And I don't think that business history as a field has to do that at all. But I think some of us have picked this as an environment to work in. And every now and then I pity myself horribly for having done this to myself. And then other days I feel like this is actually a great privilege and there's a lot that I can take from these interactions with people. And in my case, that is entrepreneurship. And so I'm in a department that has a strong emphasis on entrepreneurship. A lot of my colleagues are entrepreneurship scholars of a very classic variety. And they know about Schumpeter and they sort of know about a couple of other classical thinkers around entrepreneurship. But they're mainly interested in how do businesses get started? And what kind of environment do we have to create to have more businesses being started and create more jobs and create more sort of wealth and prosperity in society as a byproduct of that? And I think history has a very important mission and agenda of being a critique to that, of being a critique to all the different ideologies that are floating around in the business school. And I agree with Roger and others before. I don't think any of us is starving for a big new paradigm. And in fact, many of these paradigms can be quite challenging and difficult for fields. But I think it is our job as historians, at least in the business school environment, but maybe even more broadly, to be sort of a critical voice towards these paradigms, or some may want to call them ideologies. So what we're doing here right now in this project is we're thinking about entrepreneurship, not so much as an individual choice and pursuing market opportunities. All of that research is really valuable and important. But we said, what if we change the kind of emphasis here a little bit and start talking about entrepreneurialism as the ideology of entrepreneurship? Because there's something happening right now that is far beyond starting businesses and pursuing novel opportunities. It's actually entrepreneurship is kind of permeating and influencing so many areas in society where we previously would have never looked for entrepreneurship before. I just want to give you a few examples, and this is not my work, but the work of some of our PhD students. On the right side, this is an advertisement for one of these food delivery companies that is trying to convince people to join them and become drivers for them. And the entire advertisement campaign is called Like a Boss. And everything they're pushing and every argument they're making is, do you want to love your boss? Be your own. Why don't you start working for yourself rather than for other people? We've heard kind of mantras such as, rather than slaving from 9 to 5, I want to be my own boss 24/7. I want to be always in charge of my own luck. And of course, these are highly ideological messages that contribute tremendously to career choices that people aspire for, but also to inequality in society and covering up a lot of bad and evil in society. But we have a hard time talking about them because we haven't really started exploring how much entrepreneurship and how much the concepts in entrepreneurship are ideologically loaded. And I think it is important for us as historians to start reminding the social scientists that there's a difference between the concepts that are created for academic research and the concepts that we start importing from everyday language. So when my students talk about hustling their way to their next objective, to hustle is a term that has a long history and comes with a lot of baggage that is actually not reflected anymore in the way they're thinking about it. The other example here, and this one I always find a little bit intriguing and interesting, and at the same time a little bit challenging and creepy as well. This one is a design thinking workshop in the Danish military. So the military organization bringing together officers who are planning for warfare and are trying to plan ahead and think for next strategies through kind of methodologies that are very clearly designed for tech startups and kind of figuring out the next sprint to the next successful product. And so this sort of permeation of entrepreneurship in all areas of society is really intriguing to me, and I would like to understand it better. And so this is where we have kind of decided to position this project and are bringing in different historical perspectives towards understanding how that ideology of entrepreneurship has evolved. And that connects to a ton of different literatures and a lot of different disciplines. For example, in anthropology, where people have described the sort of shift that is happening from entrepreneurship being no longer about business, but actually being becoming a mode of labor and maybe even a way of life. Also in sociology, where people have talked a lot about the entrepreneur and how that entrepreneur becomes sort of a metaphor for how you act in the world. In entrepreneurship scholarship for sure, but also quick shout out to our colleague Ben Waterhouse, who just had his new book published, One Day I Work for Myself, where this is like a historical exploration of this ideal of self-employment in the United States and where it comes from and how it has been politically utilized and mobilized to make a bigger argument for people. So I think there is a lot of interesting connecting points, and it's certainly a very interdisciplinary endeavor. But at the heart, in order to critique an ideology like this, you really need a historical perspective. And I think it's very easy to sell social scientists on the need for better understanding where these types of thinking come from and what we do with these concepts when we are kind of bringing them into academic research out of their everyday understanding. I want to quickly mention to you a few people who I hope that you're going to meet in the future, because these are the PhDs that are working with us in this project. There's Anders Bormann, who works on entrepreneurialism in the military. So he gave me the pictures of the design thinking workshops. Lauren Eaton, who joined us from New Zealand and is working on the popularization of entrepreneurship concepts. And we learned with much astonishment that the Danish government, for example, has a council for entrepreneurial disruption. And the only purpose of that council is to help foster and trigger more entrepreneurial disruption in Danish society, because the idea is that that will long-term help that society generating wealth. We have a project on worth theories and capitalism's transformation with a particular focus on the European Union that is also deeply permeated by entrepreneurialist ideologies. And we have a project on the relationship between entrepreneurship and ideals of labor in past and present, with a focus on the gig economy and the different sort of new forms of labor that relate to that. And I think what I like about these projects is that all of them have a deep commitment to history and to historical analysis, but also all are seeking out conversations with other disciplines within our university and within a broader societal community. And I think in many ways, that element of dissemination and bringing some of these ideas out into the world, I think will make a difference towards how business history is perceived and how different communities within and outside of academic institutions engage with us as business historians. So I'm quite excited about having that opportunity, kind of exploring some of these things. And I think that the relationship that I have with Bogota and with all of these wonderful scholars that are sitting over there in the room and that are online will hopefully help some of these projects kind of getting on the road and creating a conversation, not just between us in the business history community, but maybe also broadening it out from there towards larger societal questions. And that could be one way of becoming relevant in society and for society, which I think then will potentially have an effect on how we think about our discipline and our community in the next 20 or 50 or 100 years. So hopefully we all get to celebrate the center in Bogota many, many times more and get a chance to, engage with you wonderful colleagues and have more opportunities for visits over there as well. Thank you so much for this invitation. It's been a real privilege and honor to be here. And I think I'm gonna stop there to make up a little bit of time.
Thank you, Christina. And you're always welcome here, you know. Christina, thank you. Now, Marcelo. Marcelo Buccelli at the University of Illinois. Well, he has a long history with the group. Thank you very much for accepting this invitation, and the floor is.
Thank you so much, Javier. Thank you for the group. The first thing I would like to mention is, of course, congratulations for this incredible achievement. And I also saw in this virtual room people who mentored me at different times of my career, including, there was earlier Mira Wilkins, Adolfo Maisel, Jeffrey Jones, and Carlos Avila. And just want to say very briefly that my career path would have been different hadn't I had the opportunity to count with their generous support at different moments. So thank you for that again. Now, let me go. I want to, I don't have a PowerPoint, partially because I had to redo what I wanted to say as long as I listened to what everybody was talking about here. And there are a couple of things that I would like to touch on that were mentioned earlier, the element of paradigms and the element of asking, big questions and legitimizing our field. Now, I would like to start by mentioning something that Paloma said before, much earlier, which is a very important thing, because she talked about the par excellence non-renewable resource that we have, which is time. I know this sounds maybe very basic, but I think her point about the lack of time really we can relate it with bigger concerns or other concerns, such as legitimating our field and paradigms. Let's remember that from our old readings of Thomas Kuhn, a paradigm needs to legitimize itself by taking out the previous paradigm and actually even replacing whatever legitimating actors had been put on, have been created by the creators of the paradigm that existed before. Now, this is something that I think has become increasingly complicated because we have this situation in which we have some very real life elements here that might create some clashes between, and I know there are many deans here, and some clashes between potential research avenues and the interests that deans of particular schools might have, because paradigms again, you need to delegitimize whatever existed beforehand. And but at the same time, we know that the venues for legitimation of our field are very strictly defined by some particular organizations. And basically, I'm talking about particularly those of us working in business schools. We have particular lists of some journals that are more important than others. Why? Because everybody says so, and an article that is published in one journal is considered better than another article considered published in another journal that is not in particular lists. No matter, regardless of the quality of this publication. So this is something, again, connecting it to what Paloma mentioned beforehand. We know that in order to ask big questions and come with new paradigms, this is something that requires time, discussion, debate, draft after draft after draft, the reading of what other people are writing, before it is being published. I have not seen lately many books that in their acknowledgements say something that we read in other times that said, I thank whoever for reading several drafts of this manuscript beforehand in their entirety. Why? Partially because, the incentives right now are not aligned in the direction of me reading a big thing that has not been published over and over just to provide feedback to whoever is writing it. Because, that will never appear in my CV. And this is something that, again, when we talk about who is legitimizing and what we do is being legitimized, we see, I mean, certain forces going against practices that can allow people to ask bigger questions. I mean, and I know there are real life pressures. I mean, like an accreditation by the AACSB is something that will translate into rankings, which translates into money, which translates into more students, and all these kinds of things. I myself, at this point, I'm part of the team of the accreditation of my school. So, I mean, I'm aware of how this works. However, I mean, when we look at where this steering us towards, we see that, of course, I mean, these can lead people, particularly junior scholars, to become more conservative in the sense of not being willing to ask daring questions, because sometimes these daring questions might be, I don't know, rejected by referees or by a desk editor in a journal, or this type of thing. And we're talking about people whose very livelihood is at stake if some article is rejected by a particular journal. So this is something in which, I mean, I celebrate about this group, and I implore you to continue, is your openness to different types of outlets of your research, which is something that we've been seeing, we see narrowing and narrowing more and more. I also want to quote Mary Jaeger, which in one of the, I mean, in the chat in this room mentioned how, I mean, yeah, we have this situation in business schools, but at the same time, in history departments, there's also this push towards a particular type of research. And we were talking about paradigms earlier this morning, and I know, I mean, yeah, I've been talking about this Kuhnian approach, and we know that, and this is something that was already mentioned by Gareth Austin earlier, so I don't need to go into detail on this, but this is something that, in my opinion, harmed departments of economics horribly, and actually killed the study of economic history in many economics departments around the world, because of the adoption of a very strict type of paradigm that is pushed by the legitimating actors, which are certain journals. And if you don't accommodate to that, you might be in trouble. Your job might be at stake, or you have the accreditation and money, and then the rector, the president, will be mad at you, and then all these problems might come. So this is, I mean, I loved, I mean, I'm not going to talk about new avenues of research, because I think everybody here has been very comprehensive in terms of what we need to do. But up to what point can we develop that type of research when tied to these legitimating roads, paths here? So this is when, I mean, we might even want to start thinking, I mean, do we want to open the door to other types of outlets of our research, and start, I don't know, developing something parallel to what has been done. I mean, like, how do deans deal with these pressures of, on one hand, trying to steer publications on in a particular direction, while at the same time not killing the creativity and openness of mind of people? I wish I had a solution here, but I don't. But I mean, this is hopefully, I mean, something that we can discuss here, and this also connects to another point that was mentioned earlier beforehand, and yeah, the kind of like grain of this audience, with some exceptions here. And well, I mean, in order to create a new generation, of course, mentorship is something extremely important. And mentorship is something that, I mean, the elements that legitimize whether a business school is good or not is something that is not really there. And it takes so much time and passion for something that will not be in your CV. Some people compensate for that in a way I think is corrupt by thinking, okay, I will be the co-author of whatever comes out of this dissertation, and in that way I'm not wasting my time, which again, in my viewpoint, is should not be allowed. So this is something in which sometimes I wonder if we might be wasting resources, particularly the very scarce we have, I mean, and the non-renewable one, like the one Paloma was mentioning here, at trying to legitimate ourselves with particular audiences rather than take different approaches. I mean, Per was emphasizing the element of teaching, and Paloma was talking about the challenges that we might have in the future at publishing particular articles, and this is something that might create problems. Not to mention, again, I mean, as I said before, the pressures to junior scholar to become more conservative and following, I mean, kind of like using a standardized way of asking questions, answering them, and showing the results of their findings. So I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm in a complaining mode here, but I mean, this is something, I mean, I wanted to talk about the larger institutional elements that might create constraints to some of the ideas that we talked about here earlier. And here, what? Oh yeah, I also wanted to touch on the point of made by Sean Van Osland earlier, like who are we talking to? And this is something, I mean, like Per, in his usual crudeness, mentioned beforehand, okay, I mean, maybe an article is read by 6 people. At least we know there were 3, actually, the 3 referees, and okay, the editor, that makes it 4. But, I mean, again, should we validate other ways of diffusing information? And how are we going to encourage people to be more creative and mentor the young people when we see these larger institutional elements playing around? So I know people are hungry. I'm the last one, not exactly the nicest image to see at the end of this long session. So I would like to close it here and give the word to Javier again. Thank you.
Marcelo, thank you. Thank you very much. Marcelo, Paloma, Cristina, thank you very much for these very provocative presentations. I think you certainly have set a wide variety of issues that we should be considering when thinking of what the road ahead is going to look like, or we want to shape it like. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions from the floor?
So, Marcelo, you highlighted multiple times the restriction that people cannot internalize the benefits from mentoring and other service in the profession. So what do you have in mind? What change could be implemented within schools to help researchers to internalize these benefits so they are more induced to these kind of things?
Yeah, and this is something, I mean, we've had some discussions here in my school about that, and people are talking about, should we count it as part of your service, or now quantifying? I mean, this is also a problem with the excessive quantification of what we do. Are we going to say, like, okay, you need to sit down with a junior scholar 1 day a week, 1 day a month? I mean, God, this should come from us. I mean, like, from our very curiosity about the field. And I know, I mean, it might sound a little bit romantic, but I mean, but yeah, I mean, like, it's but we are constrained. Actually, I think the constraint comes from other areas. Like, I mean, I mean, we know that in the end, I mean, we're seeing this situation in which publishing more and faster is better. And you're the hero if you do it a lot, and that is where I think we can find a problem that does not open the door for mentoring juniors. I'm aware I'm not really answering your question on how to change this institutionally, because institutionally it's not that they fought against mentoring; it's that all the other elements went in the way.
Thank you, Marcelo. So just to continue with provocations, so should we study the business of scientific, social science, scientific endeavors and calculate the level of pollution we're producing? Roger, please go ahead.
I don't think I'm going to answer that question, Javier, but I think it's well. I mean, I had to duck out in the middle of this conference because I'm at work and I had some work I had to do. But I think this session takes us back to the beginning of things about where you are and what you're doing there. And I'm struck by the challenge, if you will, of the political economy of our own profession, which is what I think Marcelo was talking about a lot. That there's a certain value structure that we work in there, which we can't do anything about. I mean, we're not going to be able to change these business schools, these history departments in any sort of short order there. But part of the way of handling that is part of it is just these kinds of events, these kinds of organizations that we create, in which we're able to supply mentorship and training and the diversity of opinions that may not work in our areas there, where there's a possibility of leveraging things up there. And I think the kind of mentorship that these organizations supply can be terrifically important, because that's where you can address the problems of, how many times you have to meet with a junior faculty member in order to get, a point on your evaluation. We can do these things through our organizations and all that. And I do think the online format that we have today changes the rules of the game if you want to do this in a kind of organizational manner, because you can have folks from all these different continents right here talking with you about this. So maybe because, again, I'm the optimist side, I see opportunities for organizations like yours, like the World Congress meetings that are taking place, as well as the national groups, to provide some of this mentoring and educational function, and also diversification in terms of methodologies and things like that. I think it's very important. Christina's done a lot in the BHC meeting over the last few years to have these paper development workshops where scholars come together to talk about that, this commentary and all that. So we can grow some of our own institutions in between the different places that we work with. We can't change them, but maybe we can help scholars counter what they do there. So that's one thought. The other thought I have is really coming off, again, Christina's talk, actually a comment from Mary Yeager, is being aware of this, if you will, the different political economy of the different institutions we're in. History departments, management schools have different requirements, expectations for scholars. The papers that are written for these places are different, not because we're necessarily different, because those journals require a different format and a different style, just fundamentally. And that, I think, it goes back to, if you will, emphasizing common themes and questions rather than common methodologies. I mean, Jeff brought this up at the beginning about the certain questions that have to be addressed: climate change, inequality, and things like that. Well, these can be addressed from multiple methodologies. And if we did that in some sort of conference sessions, some sort of journal issues and things like that, you can see the benefits of these different methodologies to talk about similar questions. And so the questions, I think, have the potential to hold us together while we all have to do what we have to do in the institutions that we work in. I mean, certainly my own approach to business history is shaped by being in an archives, where my job here fundamentally is to bring people in the door, whatever it is they do. And that's certainly bred in my mind a very broad approach towards business history, because that's what I get credit for at my job. That's how I get paid. That's not the same thing as someone who's working at Harvard or an institution like yours, where there's a different value structure. So I think we can accept these different methodologies and emphases, but we can try to think about the kind of topics that we share, that we can talk about together. So anyway, sorry, it's a little more of a speech than a question, but that's my thoughts.
No. On the contrary, Roger, I think it's also fair to say that at least part of the more recent history of this group has found spaces like the BHC amazingly stimulating and supportive. Most of the examples that you cited, I'm a living example of how the BHC has provided support in many of the ways that you suggested. So I'm certainly grateful, and that's something that we should not overlook in this session, is that this group has not developed on its own, or at least my view is that more recently, at least, it has not developed on its own. It's part of a very big community and different organizations within that community. So by no means. Thank you very much for those words. I think they're great. And thank you very much for the BHC, to everyone that is here from the BHC, and to many other organizations that have supported all of us. Thank you. I think that Rory has some comments, and then Mary. Thank you.
This is just a very quick comment that one of the things I noticed when I first went to Latin America 50 years ago, in contrast to what happens in Britain, is the degree of respect given to so-called public intellectuals, to historians, economists, and so on, who will write regular columns, whether for the daily or weekly press or for specialist journals. And just thinking back through all my time in Peru and Chile and to some extent in Argentina, I don't think I've ever seen a column by a business historian commenting on current affairs from a historical point of view. And I wonder whether this is something that those of you based in Latin America might consider, is getting to know the journalists. I've seen interviews with business historians, but I've never seen regular columns. I may be wrong in terms of the countries that I know. It may be different in Mexico, Colombia. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rory. I think you're right. There's one, Javier Mejia, writes for Bloomberg. But you're right. It's not something that you frequently observe in Latin America. Thank you. Oh, for the whole life. Thank you. Mary.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm not going to read my question because it's too long and some of the points have been made, but it points to the institutional constraints and how the business history group has been, in my own case at least, formative in dealing with those constraints, especially women who are expected by many universities to bounce all three balls, teaching, service, and publication at once, at a time when they're also giving birth, taking care of children, and so on and so forth. And this group in particular has been formative in just sustaining us during those times, because oftentimes these, like me, who are older, have had to do the work of reforming institutions from the inside, whether it's giving longer tenure clocks or bouncing a ball of service and teaching and publication a bit differently. Women have often been the revolutionaries here in trying to reform the institutions, because they have been caught in the disadvantages that accrue from those career ladders. So hats off to many of you who have been instrumental in paying attention to and trying to deal with those constraints. But lots of work to be done in a variety of institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. We have any hands up in the Zoom? I don't see. No? Okay.
Javier, I have a question. Maybe it's for Cristina, but maybe Marcelo, because also in Paloma, because Paloma showed a dinosaur there, tried to be provocative. And I'm wondering, and it's a self-criticism because most of us have some sort of trajectory, but do you think that any of those concern about how make relevant business history about new technologies or methodologies and how become relevant is really concerned to the youngest generation? I'm thinking about your the PhD students that you mentioned in your project. Or Marcelo, you also are putting in the table the discussion of how mentoring is important, or Paloma as well with your students. Do you know what I mean? It's because it's important also how we also integrate in the discussion the new people in the room, not always all talking about the old times or the new times and the phases that we are challenging, but what happened with the new generation. What do you think about it?
So are they concerned about new technologies popping up in academia?
New technologies and how making more relevant business history, because you, for example,
Absolutely.
are proposing this idea for this business history, but it's really business history. Someone can ask you, Christina.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to how you handle this and in your interaction with these new generations. I mean, because they will be the future.
They are very attentive and tuned into the idea of being relevant in society and also within our institution, because they know that long-term career options depend on it, right? I mean, so that's definitely a big part of it. They're also very concerned about the academic publishing game and how technology is changing all of that, right? So there's not just the idea of ChatGPT, but also journals going open access, the economics of that game changing and things like that. So I think that those are huge concerns for them. And I will say that I think it has never been more uncertain and more anxiety driving than it is right now, right? I mean, and you really feel that the PhD period is getting shorter, the demands are higher. As Marcelo said, the publications determine basically all the opportunities you have going forward, right? There's a lot of expectations, doing well in teaching and at the same time, and of providing service as well, right? I mean, so I think it is a really challenging situation to be in. And while I love the BHC and I've benefited so tremendously from everybody in the room, and Roger, you and the BHC in particular, I do think there is a problem for the youngest generation right now, because they love coming to the BHC and they enjoy that community, but the BHC is not providing them with jobs, right? So they also need mentoring within their institutional environment and getting out into the job market. And I think that's a huge concern for them. And that's a huge concern for us as a community, because that's the next generation of people that we are hoping for, right? In order to keep this great community going. So I'm extremely concerned about that. And also from the perspective of a journal editor, I mean, the technological challenges that we're facing means that the workload for editors tripled, and a lot of papers that are coming in are clearly not written based on thorough, time-intensive research in the archives or afterwards, but come from very different sources and in different processes. And that's a huge problem, right? And we have no technological solution for that yet. So it all depends on people sitting down and actually reading it and then starting that filtering process, which I think that's concerning for everybody. I mean, but in particular for the PhD students right now that have to carry all of that uncertainty, the institutional pressures of fields getting squeezed out, but also the pressures of new technologies and how they're being utilized in the field. I mean, those are really, really big anxiety drivers, and it is a mental health challenge as well, right? I mean, so.
Thank you, Christina. Marcelo, do you want to?
Well, not much to add to what Christina said, besides the fact another harsh reality. I mean, a tough job market, particularly in the history field in the United States. Creates, even more pressures. But this is when I believe, however, that one way, and actually I'm making this effort with one particular grad student in a history department, is to remind, historians have already answered a lot of questions that management scholars are asking. And sometimes it's a problem of how to frame them and how to show them. And this is something, again, I'm experimenting with this particular student. And because, yes, we know a lot. Most historians know a lot. And sometimes it's the packaging of that. And that could provide another venue. But that requires a lot of mentorship and a lot of time and commitment. But I think there can be some room over there.
Yeah, I will only like to add that increasingly private institutions, but also public institutions, at least in the European Union, are promoting that if you do research in the humanities or social sciences, you meet the Sustainable Goal developments. One which can be adapted to students, younger generations of business historians, is if you try to do digitized humanities. If you learn technologies in order to handle digitized documents from a variety of sources and countries, in order to present some ambitious answers to challenges of the time related to sustainable development goals. So that's something that it's like a challenge, but on the other hand, younger generations, I think that learn faster than mine, at least me, how new technologies work, how to handle big data, or how to handle digitized documents, which I think it might be one way to get funding and to get maybe work in private or public institutions by having these new capacities to handle information. So maybe business historians can not teach technology, but we can teach something that technicians don't have, which is source criticism techniques typical from the job of historian. That's something that not many technicians have. How to discriminate good or bad sources, how to legitimize valid or invalid sources. As Cristina, Marcello know, how to read discourses and which actors under which biases. So this is something business historians know how to do, and even try to legitimate what kind of sources organizations provide and for what reasons. So by teaching this, how to, we could maybe help students who will have to learn also technology in a new world with institutions that need people handling big data or using a lot of machines, maybe for something which is of social interest, so and which need path-dependent ideas in their minds. So it's very complex, but I think historians can provide concepts, can provide methodologies for new purposes, for new demands, for a new society that is going very fast towards conflict, but also towards innovative artificial intelligence tools.
Thank you very much. Sonia, do you want to add to this conversation?
Hi there. I'm Reneka. Maybe you please read the comments and I put it in the chat because I'm in a louder place.
I want to
something about. Yeah, I want to point out. Maybe you listen to me.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I want to point out how we have to think about narrative that we use when we're working on our works, because we're still on the traditional way, and but now the time changed. Maybe we have to move on in another way to tell the stories that we are looking for.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Certainly something we can consider, certainly. I wonder whether Carlos wants to have something, an opportunity to react. Yes, to react to these almost 4 hours of different thoughts, reactions.
Okay, thanks, Javier. I would say that basically, actually, that I got a lot of food for thought, which at this time is proper to say. I have a lot of ideas, and it's very good to have this. Second, first, an information maybe you don't have, maybe it's not clear for you all. 50 is 25 plus 25. 50 years, first 25 years plus the second 25 years. And maybe the point is this, in the first 25 years, the business history group was made up by 3 persons. None of them is a historian. For good or bad. It's a reality. All of them were people with doctoral degrees in social sciences, originally bachelor degrees in industrial engineering. That was from 74 up to 1999. From century, 2 of the 3 persons left and became a minister and all that. The other one, Enrique Ogliastri, left the university and went to Nicaragua and to Spain. And so that in this second 25 years, we basically survived by having people from history, with very formal history backgrounds. Marco Palacios, Fernando Molina, who is a historian, then Andrea Luc, 15, and last year, Luis Gabriel Galan, with a PhD in history. And in between, in 2010, we hired Javier Duran, who is an economist, but basically his doctoral thesis in economic history. And one year in 2016, Carlos Hernandez, economist, and also with a doctoral thesis in economic history. So this is a general background information to say that we are very pleased to have this event, that we are, as I said before, we are pleased, I am very pleased to be alive and well. And my hope is that the group as such, all these colleagues, for the next, let's say, 25 years or something like that, do whatever they want to improve the group. Be the voice and all that. So that is my simple thought about becoming the 50 years. Here, that's a reality. Teaching, doing research, and taking publications, and I would say very emphatically, without thousands, without millions of dollars. We along this 25 years, this 50 years, of course, we have done some research projects sponsored by the businesses we started. But it's a very small part of the whole expense. The whole expenses have been funded in a very informal way. Every semester, we have some number of courses, and if you have a project and you have publication going on, you have to talk to the dean. Discuss with him or her if you get a double discharge for 6 months. So this is very, it's a real fact. And I would say that in order to do this, we're so happy today. We don't have to have millions of dollars. We don't have to have from the very beginning a license as historians. And we have been very autonomous people. Maybe another thing is this. It's great, it's 1 p.m. so that all of us stay here for at least 5 hours 5 hours of very intense work. So thank you very much for that. And especially, it has been very nice to hear how generous are all of you in talking about the group and maybe myself. Very much. It's nice to realize that. The other thing is this, a more general thought. This group exists in a Latin American country, in a very special context and all that. But I would say something about in general, about being a Latin American researcher who goes to the Europe or the US to study and to try to get to the scholarly community. I would say that it's a very difficult task. And I just will call in Spanish to try to explain this. In my own experience, but also I would say most of us, the members of the group, it's relatively easy to become a cabeza de ratón. A mouse head. It's very a mouse head to publish and all that. But it's also extremely difficult to go to the States or to the United Kingdom, to France, and even to Spain, and very quickly you realize that in scholarly terms, you become a leon's tail, cola de león, the lion, a lion tail. It's very funny to talk about that, and it's a very nice sentence, but it's very tough to experience it. And it is not only my case, but my case and my students or my colleagues who got the degrees in Colombia and the grad degrees. And usually we have, and it's a good thing to go to the States or to the United Kingdom, especially to get the doctoral degrees. To go back to Colombia. It's perhaps very difficult to explain, but very intense to live it, to experience it. That has been at least my experience, and I guess people who younger than me and are experiencing something like this, and I would say that I'm not complaining. I'm saying that is life. That's life. If you want to stay as a mouse hit, it's very easy in Colombia, in the coming world. But if your ideals are to become a news tail, it's also very complicated. And this is not necessarily a function of your age. You may be a news tail or a mouse head when you are in your 40s, in your 50s, in your 60s, or in your 70s. So it's a decision for you to make. And finally, I would like just to read, in my very broken English, to read something that we wrote. An article you have referred to, several of you, an article we published with Garrett and with Jeff Jones in the Business History Review in 2017. And the point is that after 3 years, that means in 2020, our school here decided, after a very prolonged decision-making process, decided to translate the article. And of course, this was a novelty for the Business Review people, even for Jones. So they were not an automatic thing, but it was a kind of a very inherent thing, a very rare experience. So that when the article was published in Spanish, we agreed that it has to be published in both languages. Well, very nice edition. Design is in English. The original article provided and with the permission from the Business History Review, and this site is in Spanish. But in order to explain people, especially to people here in this school, in our school, we wrote, Gareth and Jeff and myself, we wrote a very short introductory note. It's only 4 to 5 pages. And I just was read not all the pages, of course, but only 3 ideas. 3 quotations. One quotation is this: we said at the time, the hope of the 3 authors of the original paper was this framework, the alternative business history, will enable scholars working on Colombia or China or Nigeria to stop benchmarking their firms against Western norms and start benchmarking them against the firms of other emerging markets. This will open a new world of comparative opportunities and will prevent often implicit assumptions of the experience of the West was a perennial norm against which other experiences are judged. That means one of the ideas was we have to change the benchmark for us. Very, very in-depth idea. Second idea, more simple. We said this in order to explain the whole idea of making the translation and the bilingual publication. Listen to this, all of you who have attended many conferences, US and in other words. Conference session on Latin American business history can be guaranteed to have 90% of the audience are Latin Americans. Even when the language of the conference is English, which means a lot, that nobody pays attention, only the 10%. Finally, a very nice and very profound talk. The plausible Anglophone monolingualism. The business history is Anglophone monolingualism embodies implicit assumptions of superiority. So that's the thing we wrote with my 2 colleagues, with Gareth and with Jones, and I guess it's very short, but very profound thing. And finally, thanks very much to Andrea. Look, Andrea was the person who had this initiative originally, and until now, she has worked very hard, and she has been able to convocate, to reunite all these people here. Also, thanks very much to our dean, Jimena Rueda, and also to the director, Jimena Hurtado, because none of them made the typical Latin American rhetorical opening hours. No, not at all. Jimena was very short, very concrete, and Jimena, our dean, she was in Cambridge, but she said also very serious idea. I emphasize this because for many years we have heard many things, and many people many persons in this university, for example, who enjoys making rhetoric things. So I take their words very seriously, and I repeat, thanks so very much to Andrea, to Javier Duran, and Gabriel, and all the people I don't mention, many people working very hard in order to make this celebration a very good one. And since we are so concerned with the finance all around the world. I will say, I will repeat it very loudly, that this workshop, 5-hour workshop, and all the intellectual work implies, not only the 5 hours today, but all the 11 colleagues wrote either a PPT or a paper or notes. But if you put all this together, I can say very loudly that it doesn't cost, direct costs were zero pesos and $0. Maybe I am a little bit inaccurate because the coffee and the cookie. So that it's a very sincere, very realistic message for people who think that in order to think, you have to have a grant with $1 million. Yeah, $1 million. I am very realistic on that, and that is my experience and our experience. Gracias.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos.
1 p.m. 00.
Thank you. Anyone has final words or reactions?
Xavier, if I allow, I just want to thank you. I think there's a great discussion over the last 5 hours. So I think everybody's a bit tired because you are in the one, but many of us are not one, it's even later. But I want to thank you, particularly our 11 colleagues that from the beginning, they say yes. Also, I want to point it out that we have almost at some point, 100 people attending to the workshop, virtually and in person, and more of them have been said that they will be interested in getting these discussions. So we are recording for that. So thank you very much. And I think we have other opportunities to continue discussion why business history